the way into the middle of Key West Highway, which is definitely effective use of forested area.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's another one of those cases where the stream again crosses under the road there to the other side, and it seems a little silly, but we draw a consistent buffer around it, and sometimes those extend into the road like that.
Yeah, because if you're familiar with the area, the Great Seneca Highway in that area apparently is having some very substantial drainage changes made right now. You can see they're installing 3-4 foot wide concrete pipe, and the question is now going to be more water flowing from right to left, and is this area going to essentially get inundated by the ongoing changes to what is going on near the intersection of Muddy Branch and Great Seneca Highway? Just a question, because it's obviously going to be some fairly substantial changes in stormwater management from that area. And this stream that you're talking about, I think, connects to that over across and follows up along Great Seneca Highway all the way to Muddy Branch. Is my keen observation from trying to drive and look at the trees at the same time. There must be a fairly substantial water flow in there at times. So I'm not sure what they planned.
I also noticed that they are upsizing the pipe system, the storm drain system coming in and going out the other side, and asked the same questions about to what extent will this area potentially be inundated. And according to the calculations, I don't check the calculations for storm flow here. DPS does that, but according to the applicant, the drainage regime on this site is not going to change substantially. They're providing for safe conveyance of the water to one side of the site, and especially out the other side under the road, under the culvert, to get under Muddy Branch Road there, or Great Seneca Highway.
Okay. Well, I would just poll the members of the committee. Does this site plan meet your expectations of what the master plan said we are trying to achieve in this area with respect to openness to, I can't remember, is it open to nature or to trails? I can't remember what the exact words are, and whether or not this rapid warren of townhouses is going to meet the expectations that the master plan intended when it said there would be open space, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, I'm a bit cynical, so I won't talk any more about that, but other people might want to comment on whether or not this little green streak at the bottom of is really meets the expectations of the master planners.
Well,
this was Jane Briggs. One of the questions I had, which sort of goes to what Gary was saying about preliminary site plan, they submitted a few variances to the master plan. So it kind of goes to Art's question as well. So the amount of forestation required or reforestation, they're handling some of it on site, and I guess a portion is now going to be off site. Or they asked for a waiver on the amount of commercial to the building. So they seeked several waivers or variances that I'm curious if, as a committee, we have the opportunity to agree with the planning reviewers on granting those variances. But I recall from some of the previous presentations that we got a variance on this, we got a variance on that, and flags went in my head like, oh, well, that's interesting. I guess we can't challenge the variances that have been decided upon.
Yeah.
And so I think it goes back to Gary's point too about, once the variance is granted to the amount of commercial that they have to provide that's not consistent with the master planning, do we as a committee have the opportunity, or should we even find it appropriate to challenge what the planning board has already reviewed and agreed to? So that's an open question about variances in general and in these plans.
And actually, I would point out that it is rather late in the game to ask the developer to say, oh, well, another group has said this is a poor compromise, and have them to go back. Obviously, they've spent considerable time, money getting to this stage. And
I would absolutely agree. I'm just throwing that out there as a observation for moving forward for future plan reviews.
valid.
I'm not suggesting that anything goes back. We are way too late on this site plan. I totally agree.
I will throw in one word here and then let see Marilyn looks like she's also getting ready to weigh in. But I'm going to start by saying that the staff has worked with the applicant, and they've come to whatever recommendations they have. But the planning board is the deciding body, and I have been involved with a number of reviews where the planning board did not agree with the staff's position and took its own position. So the staff's position is a recommendation. The planning board frequently, usually goes along with it, but not always. And so my thought would be that the IAC has the freedom to make whatever comments they think are appropriate and provide them to the planning board, so the planning board hears them and can consider them. And Marilyn, having said that, I will let you.
So I was going to say that even though I don't think that there would be any change, I think that it would not be inappropriate to say something. The variances, I think we may not have agreement on the variant. We may not have agreement on those. I think the green space, the offsite reforestation, we may have agreement, but I don't know what everybody thinks about the commercial. I think we had a long discussion about that the site wouldn't support additional commercial. So I think that might have been a reasonable variance, but other people may disagree with me on that. So,
yeah, the argument they were making is you've got commercial, or again, I always have a hard time with these presentations, and I guess Maren and Steve, for future reference, maybe this, but we see these presentations and we have these arbitrary, these plots in arbitrary orientations with very hard, it's very hard to tell the context for the site and things like this. So I always wind up, while we're talking, going to Google Maps and doing something like this, so I can actually see where I'm looking at, right? And so what we're looking at is here, right? Is this at the bend in Key West, right by CVS, right by the little office buildings over here, right? On the southern side of it, I guess, or is Trader Joe's and so on. So their argument is we're adjacent to and near, and you've got Falls Grove not too far off over, well, it's quarter mile, right? But their argument is there's plenty of retail around. This site isn't amenable to a lot of ingress on retail anyway, and therefore, and the market doesn't need it. So therefore, unless we were, maybe we'll put a couple of shops for, to service the immediate community, service-oriented businesses, maybe a Dunkin' Donuts, something like that. We don't need another one, but, and that's about all the site will support, because you got CVS here and Taco Bell and so on here, and because you've got Trader Joe's down here and so on, which honestly isn't totally unreasonable. The only, my concern around that is if we've got this, we had always talked about the opportunity to do some placemaking around PSTA stop, I'm sorry, CCT stops, for instance, and we've got a CCT stop up here, but no retail planned for there. And the answer to that was, well, we've got some buildings that have convertible space that might be converted into retail if the opportunity presents itself. So I don't know, retail is one of those things. Yeah, I mean, and you know, taking a step out for a second, you know, again, because we have a number of people that are new to committee, and I'm guessing you haven't memorized the master plan. You know, you haven't been thinking about it as long as some of us on the committee. But when we're having these discussions, you know, key hot buttons that we often talk about, you know, things that I often, you know, I spend my time thinking about are, where is retail? Is this an appropriate mixed, you know, does it meet the mixed use objectives of the you know, the GSSC? Does it have does it meet green space and public space objectives of the GSSC? Does it meet placemaking objectives of the GSSC? Meaning, you know, in this area, we're supposed to be having certain areas, certain junctures around CCT stations and other where we are creating places, opportunities for public, you know, and connectivity, connections to outside. Are we creating streetscapes? So I guess, you know, I'll transition that. And I would say the biggest issue I have with this plan is that I don't see any accommodation of real streetscapes here. I mean, there's no streetscape. There's surface parking on Key West, you know, and on Key West, I'm facing, you know, other, you know, commercial over here. And I'm going to have a surface parking lot over here, which I've, you know, to me is not in keeping with what our objectives are for the GSSC, right? Straight up. And then, you know, on this side, we have green space, which is wonderful, but it's on another major road. It's on Great Seneca Highway. And so we're not accomplishing any streetscape development on Great Seneca Highway. We're giving it to green space, which is great. And then obviously there is no other true street facing. So we have two major street facings here where there is no streetscape, you know, accommodated or very minimal. I mean, the only streetscape they show is right here. This is what faces Key West Highway. I have a path, which is very nice. You know, I have a little bit of border, but then I have the edge of an apartment building, and I have surface parking, which they're appropriately not showing because it's not going to be pretty, right? So my question to, you know, staff and, you know, is why was that accommodation? You know, why was there no consideration and no effort made to discuss streetscape when in fact you do have an interface point with other commercial here, you know, and, you know, on both sides, honestly, both major highways. And when clearly the GSSC, that's one of our objectives.
Okay, excuse me, I was muted for just a second, and I'm sorry we don't have some of our other reviewers here who worked on things like the streetscape more than I did, but I will just I'll just share a few things on behalf of staff based on things that I heard when I was sitting in meetings and so forth and so on. All good points that you raised, by the way, that everybody has raised. I do know that we pressed the applicant on commercial development on this property and really kind of pressed them for a couple of years and continually got back responses that they talked with potential builders who might come in, and they surveyed the retail landscape and the commercial landscape, and they tried to interest potential tenants, commercial tenants, and got no bites. That their word to us was that they tried to float that out there. They tried to make it work, and that they just couldn't get anybody who was interested in investing in that on this site the way it laid out. But we did press them on that. We did also press them open space and had a little bit more success with that along the bottom. In terms of the streetscape, again, I didn't specifically work on this, but I will try to see if I can share my screen real quick. There are a couple of additional images that give at least a little bit more information. I can't comment on them a whole lot because other reviewers worked on these things. But can you see what's on my screen right now?
No,
Not yet.
Okay, let me back up and try this
But
again.
let me ask the question while you're doing that. The loop, the LSC loop trail goes through that site, which is just really nice. Are they building their section of the trail as part of their project?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they will.
So
be doing-
that should meet the design standards that have been laid out for the trail materials, benches, whatever had been previously discussed in detail. And that is a site plan issue. That the trail be consistent with the design guidelines.
Yes,
That I know the county worked on and had done some design, maybe 30% design on.
that's right. And for some reason, when I hit the share screen, it is not letting me share. I want to share. But it's not letting me do it. There are a couple of other graphic images that are included that you might be able to get on our Development Application Information Center, the DAIC website, where you can actually look at the plans that were submitted that we're reviewing. And we might be able to drop into the link to that, and then the plan number. You would need the plan number, which is 8/2022-0050. The renderings that I'm looking at are they're listed as support drawings, and there are 4 images from the Key West Avenue area. A couple of them are what Phil was alluding to on those a couple of the images that were provided in the presentation. There are some additional images. There's another sheet with 3 images from Blackwell Road and Street A intersection, but they all show similar streetscapes and provide a little bit more information, whether that is satisfactory or not. It may not be, but hopefully we can get you a link to be able to get into the DAIC so you can actually see all of the materials that were submitted.
Do they have any cross sections of like where the Medical Center Drive and the streetscape? You could see the streetscapes and the.
Yeah, what I was looking at were renderings, were artists' renderings.
Okay.
I'm currently opening the, one of the problems that we all face, and probably more, public members of the public would probably have an even tougher time with. The submitted drawings or application drawings contains 84 different plan sheets.
Yeah.
And but it includes landscaping plans, it includes the forest conservation plan, it includes the site plan information, it includes architectural renderings, and I'm not sure if any of these are cross sections for roads. We may let me just take a look. So there's an applications drawing folder with 84 plan sheets. There's a support drawings folder with another 20 sheets. And those appear to be stormwater management, storm drain, fire department access, sediment controls, site distance, and utilities, and these 2 artist renderings. Gary, I'm not seeing cross sections. on this.
I don't remember seeing them either, Gary. And I have to say, I do not typically review many
Site
development
plans.
applications, and I get very overwhelmed with the amount of documents that we get. I did share a link to the ePlans DAIC link and in the chat, and that includes all of the documents that we've received from the applicant for the Elms at PSTA site. If you are an enthusiast and would like to go through all of them, but it sounds like Steve is trying to find some of the more relevant ones, or at least the more illustrative ones. And Steve, you can also, if you want to shoot me an email with some of the images that you have, if I can share my screen if you
Well,
aren't able to do that.
the presentation that you emailed us from the last meeting does have some pictures of some of the open space and some of the other where you can see it looks like the trail. I don't know which page this is. Let's see, Key West Avenue side path. Okay, so this is the side path on Key West, which is on, is there a page number? I can't see it. I'm looking, and I mean, it's pretty bland, quite frankly. I'm glad there's a side path, but it really doesn't show Key West being as many lanes. I mean, it doesn't kind of show the cross section.
That path is necessary to acquire Chinese food at the restaurant, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
And so I guess those are the sorts of questions that I think are right on target for the committee to ask and to request the planning board to look at the sections, to look at the landscape, where the benches, what do the benches look like? Because at site plan, you know what the benches are going to look like. They're going to tell you what they're going to look like. What kind of trees are they going to have? The size of the trees, I mean, that was my expectation of what would be on those 80 or 90 pages.
Yes, and some of those details are there. I'll try to help out a little bit. If you go to the DAIC site, there are some kind of prefaces on some of the file sheet names. Anything that starts with an LL is going to be landscape and lighting. There are some that are labeled site, and those are the kind of the general site plan elements. There are a lot of landscaping and lighting sheets. Some of them are very dry images and specs about lighting and so forth and so on, but there are also some sheets that show locations of some plantings. There are planting lists that are associated with that, so you can see what kinds of plants are being put in the ground. And then with those that are labeled FCP are the forest conservation plans. The plans are kind of divided up. Anything that's in the application drawings folder is something that they're actually submitting to be approved and stamped with our approval so that they can pull their building permits and sediment and erosion control permits. Things in the supplemental drawings folder or supplemental documents folder, those will not be stamped and approved, but they are provided as additional information to help understand the project. So the ones, those 84 sheets that are in the application drawings folder are the ones that are going to actually get, if they are approved, assuming they are approved, they would get stamped and signed as the official site plan.
So I guess, my question, I know you, I understand that commercial is not wasn't deemed an option for this site, which is, again, a separate conversation. But where was, I guess there are two things that are clearly absent from here. One is any, one of the apartment buildings being street facing, as we have with, the buildings that are further down, Key West, right? And the other is any structured parking, as opposed to surface parking that they have. So were those, and again, I mean, we're kind of, because of we're late in the conversation, kind of, it's a little bit late for some of these questions, I think, and because the developer isn't actually here, it's a little bit hard to, to delve into these kind of questions, but those are clearly the kind of questions that I would have for the developer. And frankly, those are, key concerns I would have from the perspective of my perspective on the GSSC, which is, I mean, we're supposed to be building, a moderately dense, semi-urban, semi-urban, not suburban feeling landscape, where we are placemaking around our key transportation corridors. And again, I just don't see that happening in this plan. And I don't, I see a lot of density, but I don't see the accoutrements of density, like structured parking, for instance, that kind of take, that takes, that make it feel a little bit more upscale and a little bit, nicer from a place perspective than your typical suburban apartment complex with a street facing, surface parking, right? I'm just wondering where those conversations happened in the process and how we ended up here.
Yeah, and again, I'm reporting from having sat in meetings. Like any good bureaucracy, we have our urban designers that were parrying those points with the applicant through the review process. We've got our transportation planner who was focusing on those issues. Again, from having been in the meetings, I can report that all of those things were, all of those points were raised. Among the discussions with the applicant, some of the reasons why, for example, structured parking was not provided has to do in part with the expense, and the expense particularly related to the fact that they are providing more than the required number of moderately priced dwelling units. So it was a balancing of needs and desires. And I know that, trying to create more affordable housing units is one of the goals of the county. And in this particular case, that was a powerful argument for cutting expenses in some areas in order to provide more housing units that could be afforded. So that was a kind of summary of the discussion. There were also discussions with staff about bringing the buildings closer to the road edge, and placing any parking behind the buildings. There were some issues. There's some issues apparently with a Washington gas line that along that northern boundary of the property, that prohibited some of those things from taking place. So again,
So I just want to jump in. It's 7:55, and we have another project, and this is the last chance that we have as a group to weigh in. So I don't know if we want to kind of go through. I took notes on a few things. I think that there's some general kind of a few things that we kind of agree on. So can I go through them and then we kind of decide whether we want to, I'm assuming we're going to write a letter and whether we should include what things we should include in that letter. Okay. So the first one was the parcel A, or is that what we're calling it? Parcel A, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, that's right.
So, you know, as that is actually the largest green space on, the biggest green space, we want to make sure that whatever treatment's used for the trail, we want to make sure that it's an effective asset for the community, regardless of, you know, we don't want it to end up being underwater or something like that. So, of course, whoever's writing this is going to make it a lot more eloquent than I just said. But I think we agree that we want to call out this parcel A, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go by consent, by absence of dissent. Okay. Just the overall comment that we've made several times throughout whenever we've seen this is the green space that we were expecting more green space than currently is. Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay. Streetscape. I think Phil, your comment about you know, the expectation that this is not just an apartment complex in the middle of a suburb, that the streetscape could be more front facing, more attention to the streetscape. That would be included. We're going to have to negotiate who's writing this and what words we use, but that including streetscape in there. Yeah, general.
Yes.
We didn't talk a lot about it here, but we've talked a lot about it throughout, is the connection to the neighboring retail space. That needs to be a walkable, easy connection to the retail spaces around. The loop, the loop
LSC
trail,
loop. Yeah.
LLC loop.
We want
Assuming
it
that
designed- You want it
assuming the
designed to-
developers. Go
You
ahead,
want it-
Gary.
I think you want it designed to the standards that we've agreed to, that the, you know, 30% design plans show with the materials and the quality.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
I mean, I don't remember what they are, but obviously it was a pretty high-end
Yep.
Trail.
Yep. And just in FYI, that is in the the county's portion is in the CIP for the next CIP. So
Right.
And then the issue of you know, we want to make sure that the benches and the trees and the location of the size of the trees are all, I don't know what qualitative word we would use for that, but we want to call attention to that.
Well, there should be a standard of equality. I'm not an urban, I don't know, I'm not a designer, so there should be some level of expectation of quality of design for street furniture.
Okay.
Some category, but I don't know what the categories might be.
I'm a little bit averse to making vague, broad, sweeping statements like that. I don't see that especially helps the process or you know, makes our feedback especially valuable.
Would you not want to include this point, or you want to make it more specific?
I would, well, I don't know how to make it more specific, but therefore I would exclude it. You know, I think there are design standards that are part of the master plan that are, the planning boards, that the planning staff, the planning staff's job is to ensure that they're met. And we have to assume that they're going to, we work with them. We have to assume that they're going to do that job.
Okay.
I think it's also fine that, I think what Bill is referring to is there were design guidelines that accompanied the 2010 plan that were developed by the staff. And I think it's fine if you want to mention that you expect these elements to be, in conformance with the standards set by the design guidelines. And then you don't have to get specific about it because it should already be specific in the design guidelines. But it's just putting that forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could include that commentary with any any letter that we provide. So that could be a preamble. We're assuming.
So I would.
You know.
I just want to add another preamble. Hi, this is Mitch Bonanno. Sorry, I've been off video most of the meeting, but listening carefully. I think any preamble should say also that we're not intending to somehow contradict what's been approved via a preliminary plan or something else, or like it's not a relook at what's already been approved. It's a refining of those to just make sure the holistic intent of the master plan is being incorporated into this.
Yeah, I think that yeah. Okay, wait, well, okay, so what speaks to that then is the, do we say anything about the variances that, that have already been approved? I personally wouldn't add that, but I know that others might. Jane, do you have a?
I don't. I think it's too late. I think my comment was really more forward thinking.
Yeah, and thanks, Jane. I mean, that was one of the reasons why Phil and I met with Marin and Steve to, and I think we said this at the last meeting. This committee's been going on for, gosh, years and years and years and years, and nothing happened for most of that time. And so we just got complacent with not being advisory, right? So we will do a better job going forward. Over 10 years, yowza, it's amazing. I just can't believe that. So
yeah, I have grandkids now.
That's crazy. So I guess, Phil, you and I can talk offline and work with Marin and Steve to get a letter.
Sure. I mean, yeah, we can talk about the process and, offline about how we draft it and get it reviewed by the committee and then send it forward.
Okay.
And I know, go ahead, Steve.
There's some time to work with, but something interesting to think about is that, if we can get the letter with a little bit of time ahead of the planning board hearing, it might be something where the applicant may, in their presentation, or staff in their presentation, may want to look at those items and see if there's additional information that they can share about that in that meeting, so that maybe it will, help the process, and maybe the IAC members can see some of those things that they're concerned about, whether they have actually been addressed and they just haven't shown well to this point, or whether it's a real lack and something for the board to consider.
Okay. What about the next one?
Also, really quick, I just wanted to point out that Jane and Manisha both left comments in the chat. Jane left a comment about the concern about community parking available at the athletic field. And Manisha mentioned that she'd recommend the planning board condition that new owners of the residential development are made fully aware of the planned transit improvements so that they're not fighting future BRT stations in the area.
That's excellent. And in fact,
really
what
good.
we asked in other places is a sign be placed on the right of way
Yeah.
to show the future right of way for the Corridor Cities Transitway.
Yeah, that was a big issue in King Farm.
Also in Crown.
In Crown, yeah.
Right.
Well, I think that's why they put those signs there at Crown, was because they didn't put them at King Farm, and
Yeah, but I
That
think
was a mistake.
that's a site plan issue. So that is something that might be considered in the letter.
Both point.
And this is Jane. My comment about the athletic fields is that we have an informal athletic field on our campus that the community uses, without technically permission, but parking has been an issue because they come with their kids. They're coming there for, practice, to play. I don't know where people would come to this community athletic field and park. And then they kept going, well, we got off-site street parking. And I'm like, but not around that field, I don't think. Or on that main entrance. Or if it is, it's 5 spots or something. So I don't know where people go that's going to, unless they walk there. Or they're the residents there that's using that field. And so I don't know if there's a suggestion that, and I hadn't zoomed in either to that site plan to see how much parking.
Great Seneca.
I don't know where they think, but again, if that field's to be used by the community, then there may need to be a dozen parking spots or something.
Yeah,
I'm not talking like a parking lot, but I'm just saying, I don't know where people go. Families go.
That's a great point, and I think that's another one where if you raise it as an issue, I know that staff had those very same concerns and had the applicant identify where they were expecting the parking to happen, and the applicant indicated that they had looked at the residential parking and made sure that there was parking also to be able to for people to access that. I think that is something that if you bring that up, should make that a highlight of whatever presentation is made at the planning board, so that the planning board can hear that concern and can see the response and help determine if that's adequate.
Yeah, because Steve, I think we raised that question in their presentation, and they made it sound that they would go into the community and park on the streets in front of the homes and the townhouses as like a visitor to a house. I just remember I did not necessarily have 100% buy-in on the response back about all the extra parking.
You can't really park on the streets because they have driveways for their two-car driveways and the 2-car garage. If you look at the plan, there isn't any on-street parking inside the townhouse community.
Yeah, there is. They're proposing it on every street, they said.
Well, I'm looking at the townhouse. The townhouses have garages, or are they in the back on the alleys? Maybe they are. Oh, well.
I don't know, but again, it wasn't a good response, I don't think, when we asked in the last presentation. But again, you don't want to argue with them in these meetings, but.
Okay, shall we go on?
Yeah, so agreed. Why don't we start on, we have the second plan. The second plan is the Treville parcel.
Yeah, Treville parcel in building B.
Yeah, which is, to be clear, that's Alexandria, who again we've met with in the recent past. I'll share my screen again. Oh, somebody's got it up already. So,
Sorry, that's Marin. But if Phil, if you want to take over, you are welcome to take over.
Nope, happy to let you drive. But yeah, I mean, so But what would be useful, again, just to recontextualize for everybody should recognize this, but yeah, it's that red area circle at the bottom is the Alexandria Realty parcel that we've been talking about that is right next to the old Human Genome, now GlaxoSmithKline complex, and next to Treville Gateway, which is off to the right in this picture, right? So again, I'm very visual, so when I look at these things, I have to be able to visualize where all the, where all this stuff is relative to each other. And what Alexandria is highlighting for us here is all of their other buildings. And Alexandria is, a developer that has done a lot of work in the area for those of us, and, they tend to do high quality stuff, and it's, and they have a lot of investment here. So, but what do you call it? When we talked about this, I think the main comments we had were, again, around connectivity to the surrounding retail was a consideration. Again, right off to their left, that's what do you call it, Trader Joe's and that area. And there's actually some natural connectivity there. There's some pass-throughs. I think that's Taco. I could bring it up, or you could bring it up, Marin, on Google Maps. But there's like a taco place, I think, there that in one of those buildings. I mean, it's just a natural, easy connectivity between this campus and the Trader Joe's and other retail immediately to its, I guess, what would that be? Northwest,
West.
northwest. So, and then other things around it. There's not that. I mean, there's Treville Gateway and the residential in Treville Gateway to the lower right. So,
Right. I think the issue we had was the traffic. They hadn't done. I think Marin said that they had not done an updated traffic study, and they were changing the access points, and that there was a question. Jane had some questions about the only way to get out and go left on Darnstown was going to the universities of Shady Grove and Treville Gateway to get the traffic signal. And I think that was the question or the concern. Is that right, Jane?
Yeah, she just put something in the
It is.
chat.
I put it in. I have very, very, very strong opinions about this, because if they don't have to do a traffic study, I think our comments should say that intersection must be part of Building B. They're like, oh, that will take a lot of time and planning, and we're going to do that after all the buildings are constructed. It's like, no. You
the
can't put.
intersection where Great Seneca meets, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they said that they would install that. It's in their plan, but it wasn't planned till after Building C was built.
Right.
So it's not part of Building B. So it's not part of Building A, which is already a problem. And now they don't want it to be part of Building B site plan either. It's part of, oh, that one you just had before showed that it didn't have it in there. See how it's not there?
Is it? But do you really you think that that's
Critical.
less good than routing the traffic out through Treville Gateway? Jane?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a problem that they're dumping everybody out next to the senior center, next to the open space. So my recommendation is that we require that entrance be constructed as part of Building B, or constructed upon substantial completion of Building B or something. But to wait till Building C is built seems absurd to me, because there's no way to get out and make a left-hand turn on Darnstown.
Darnstown, yeah.
Steve, do you remember? I think it is conditioned with Building C. I'm going to try to find the exact language about that extension that that Jane is speaking of, which if you look really closely on this drawing, you could see it's dotted line that shows it, but it is not drawn in with the other roads, in that dark gray color, but it's kind of outlined really lightly here.
Yeah,
And so there's no connection to Darnstown Road with this plan. for a
That-
left-hand turn. And I just think that,
That's right.
Or,
they-
or to go straight up Great Seneca. I mean, clearly, if you want to go to Sam I, you want to go to 270, you want to be at Great Seneca. And you should just be able to go straight on Great Seneca.
absolutely, that intersection needs to, or if you're coming from Great Seneca to this
Yeah,
property,
you come right in, you come straight in. You don't have to go.
you
in the
know,
neighborhood.
otherwise you're going to have to take a left down Darnstown, take a right. And
Yeah.
we already have, like, that intersection right now is not. So yeah, because I live that intersection, I know what it's like. And
Which
I just think it
intersection?
should be conditioned on building B, not
you-
building C.
You are right, Jane. It is not a condition of approval for building B.
So that would be my motion to the IAC, is that we request that as a condition of building B. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me. I just feel very strong about it. And now I will get off my pulpit.
Well,
Art,
you
I don't know if you're
remember
talking,
that
but
they didn't have to do a traffic study because the adequate public facilities approval was 20 years ago or whenever it was.
Yeah.
And things are very much different now than they were then.
Yeah.
Um,
There were still horse-drawn carriages on Darnstown Road when this was approved.
yeah, well,
You remember that too, Art? I
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gary, I got a sense that you agreed with my concern.
I do. I agree, but I'm in a kind of in a difficult position because other people in my department have reviewed this, and I believe they may have had similar comments, but because of the prior approval, that may not have moved forward. Because when I have discussed it, when I went back to the office after our last meeting, I was talking to some people about what happened here. And I believe that the answer was it was part of the prior approvals.
Can you go
Okay.
to the last slide, Maren? I think the last slide actually shows the intersection in question. Yeah, isn't that the Great Seneca intersection at the bottom there that they're eventually going to put in?
Yeah,
Correct.
that's Darnstown and Great Seneca.
Right. So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Specifically, Jane, right?
Yeah.
It is. And the illustration doesn't look like it was designed by a traffic engineer, but an artist, because they don't
There are
quite.
no left turn lanes. It looks like it's a single lane.
I'm not really sure. The whole intersection needs to be considered, but illustratively, it looks what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I really don't know how they're queuing or crossing the highway to get in.
They're going over the
But
island.
it is a big intersection. They'll have to redo all that traffic lighting and controls and
Yeah.
left turn lanes and
Well,
straight lanes and right lanes.
My concern would be pedestrians.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is a huge intersection to cross as they've designed it there.
Yeah.
There is an island in the
Mhm.
middle, but boy, I mean, how many traffic signals do you want to wait to cross that entrance?
Well, and that's a very good point, though, too, when you talk about the PSA site and all that density. If this is a live work kind of condition where all these people that are who work here live in that neighborhood and they're walking here to work,
Yeah.
then that connection should definitely be improved from a pedestrian connection
Right.
over to that community for sure. And that little diagonal crosswalk there doesn't look like
No,
it
it doesn't.
aligns
I don't
with
know who
traffic
designed
lights
it.
at all. It
No.
puts them like in the middle of traffic.
Yeah.
It changes, right, when you're in the middle to see how fast you can run to the other side.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, where is the traffic light in that crosswalk? But
Yeah.
we're going to give the artist leadway. I don't know if there's a site plan that makes it more accurate, that you can cross the street after the red light instead of before a red light. Because it's
You're gonna include the pedestrian connections to surrounding developments.
Yeah.
USG and PSTA.
Right, and Jane, as you know, the sidewalk ends on that side of the street, just past Treville Gateway, as it
Right.
hits your property. There's no sidewalk then to Shady Grove,
Exactly. Which
which
should
I
be
think is a
done
big
too.
mistake.
Again, I don't know where, if there's a bike path or anything on this road. Is it a shared road at this point? But I guess there's no, I don't know what the bike way is along this road.
Okay, anybody else have other issues on this one?
So, Gary, you're saying the sidewalk on Darnstown
Yes,
doesn't
it
continue
ends.
all the way on the side that this development
Yes,
ends.
it ends at the frontage with Universities of Shady Grove.
The Trevilla Gateway Drive, it doesn't go from Trevilla Gateway Drive
To
to
Shady Grove,
Shady Grove.
right?
So
And
obviously
that's a big, I mean, if you're gonna get to the shopping centers, the shopping center at Falls Grove, and if you're gonna get to the university, you know, and have a pedestrian, you know, if you want to get to the Wooten Parkway, side path there, you know, you need to be on that side of the street.
yeah. So
I
is
don't know
that
whose responsibility that is, but that wouldn't be
right?
necessarily, wouldn't
The
necessarily be this developer.
Yeah. Is that something that we would comment on as part of this plan, though?
I
mean,
would comment on it that to find out the status, and if the developer is doing any offsite, required to do any offsite improvements.
And can somebody repeat that for me? I'm typing the note. So any offsite improvements required that.
Right. Again, this approval occurred long before we had
Right.
Other conditions, but it would seem to me that that's a pretty critical missing gap of sidewalk. If we're going to create a walkable community, to have that portion not be included. What is it like? It's probably 300 or 400 feet. It's not insignificant.
yes.
Are we
No, it's
also
not
asking
insignificant.
for pedestrian connection to the shopping center? Doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. We are asking for that, right?
Yeah, I'm doing pedestrian connection to the surrounding properties, PSTA, USG, and retail.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
That would be good.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know. Are
Much
they,
easier.
excuse me, are they anticipating that the occupants of A, B, and C are necessarily going to be in contact with the other properties they own across Darnstown Road? Because that there's obviously no connectivity there.
Well, that's where the crosswalks and the intersection at Great Seneca is important.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to take a look right now at the site plan along Darnstown, and there are places where I see notes that say replace concrete sidewalk with 11-foot ADA compliant asphalt side path. I'm just trying to make sure I can track it all the way through the site, and I'm not sure. Again, I don't know if I'm going to try once again to see if I can share my screen, but I haven't had any luck with that so far. No, it's not letting me do it. So anyway, that I don't want to leave the meeting. No, I don't want to leave. Excuse me, hit the wrong button. So anyway, and this is something that I think you definitely want to comment on, and we can have staff and/or the applicant address at the planning board, and it'd be good to have them. It may be that they're providing something. I can't imagine that we would approve something that would not create a safe, walkable path, at least along Darnstown Road on
Yeah.
on the frontage. Can't imagine that we would do that, but might as well ask the question. And then also you can also ask the question about whether they're providing, again, you can see crosswalks in the site plan to get across Darnstown. But I don't know, if there are any pedestrian signals or other signals to ensure safety. So those are good questions to ask. With any luck, we'll get some good answers from staff and the applicant at the presentation. And if it's not satisfactory, this is something that you probably know that the planning board is big on, is pedestrian and bicycle safety. So it's inadequate here. I think you'll have a very receptive audience for that part.
All right, so I have ingress, egress onto Darnstown Road. If there's no traffic study, the new entry off Darnstown needs to be part of Building B. Pedestrian connections to the surrounding properties, PSTA, USG, and retail. Full sidewalks on Darnstown, crosswalks, and pedestrian signaling. And then, are there any offsite improvements required? Could this be the missing gap of sidewalk?
Right.
Anything else?
Did anybody hear what their sustainability goals or initiatives were for this complex? Did they mention that they were using any green rating systems or anything for any of these buildings? Were they seeking LEED certification for any of them? And is it a requirement by the county? Because I know when we asked about the PTSA site, they were like, they had no sustainability initiatives included in the development except for the apartment building where it was required. So I don't know exactly what the requirements are for the county as far as this type of building. Do you know, Steve?
Yeah, they're subject to the, I'm trying to remember where we are in the adoption of the International Green Construction Code for the county. And that's probably the most controlling thing. I have asked them about sustainability to highlight those in their presentation, but I will have to see what they provide.
Okay.
Would be great if you asked that, though.
I'm given the type of building they are, I'm sure they'll have a heck of a footprint.
Yeah.
I'll also just say on the sidewalk conversation, I think it's still worth mentioning in a letter, but it does look like possibly as part of their approval for site plan for building A, their plan amendment that they agreed to improve public sidewalks and pathways along Treville Gateway Drive and Darnstown Road. So presumably that would include that missing link, but I think it's always good to remind the planning board of issues that are existing.
Okay, pardon me, but I've got to run and some other things have to get done tonight. Thank you for your time and effort, everybody, and I'll help review the pieces on the lot parcel A, my favorite subject. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Art.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Art.
Bye.
Thanks.
Okay, so are we done with those two things?
I thank you, Marilyn and Phil. I think this was a good conversation, and I'm
Yeah.
glad that the committee is moving forward with their thoughts on the site plans.
Good, so I will, I took notes in my Outlook and I'll clean them up and then Phil, I'll email you and Maren and Steve, and we'll figure out how this is actually going to turn into a letter. How it's magically going to turn into a letter.
It'll be great.
It'll
Thanks.
be great. I'm sure it will. Okay. Over to you, Maren.
Great. And also, I just wanted to say on this, I think we're all learning how this process can work the best. So if you didn't, speak up a lot during this, but you think that there are better ways that this input process could be managed or coordinated, please let me or Marilyn or Phil or Steve know, and we can, I think we're all learning together and figuring it out together. So we'll be striving to improve it as we review more plans. So please, feel free to share
Yes,
your thoughts on it.
absolutely. And a good question is, we were kind of going back and forth about, do we want to have the applicant here to answer questions? But there's kind of a push and pull. Jane, I think you were talking about how you don't, argue with the applicant in their presentations. And so I don't know whether you guys can let us know whether it would be helpful to have the applicant here, or if you feel less, constrained about what you say in your discussions, if you feel it's easier for you to talk as a committee.
So I think the going forward, I think the process, it'll be a smoother process as we're getting these presentations and providing our input orally to the applicant, because I think that that's very important, that the committee members themselves take notes, and that, Phil and I record the comments. And then we can express our opinions all along the way, right? So we just missed the first one, right? The site plan, the preliminary plan.
Right.
But then we have those notes to come back and say, well, they didn't fix that. We told them we had this concern. They fixed that concern. Thank you. Or they didn't fix that concern. So we need to continue to say that, right? So that feedback loop.
Marilyn, I also think it might be helpful is we can ask our questions and have the conversations with the presenters, but maybe then they leave the meeting and then we have 15 minutes of consensus building after they leave.
Yes,
So
I think you're right.
If I have a strong opinion and everybody disagrees with the opinion, then my opinion may not matter.
Yep.
Well, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but you understand what I mean.
Yep. No, I think that's a great that we build into the agenda presentation. Thank you very much. Then committee discussion.
Yes, following the presentation so that we can build a consensus among us on our conversations that we had.
Yep.
That's really useful. We can structure the meetings like that.
And I think the critical aspect of that is the timing of the meeting, right? That it occurs, I mean, it's nice to get an introduction to a new plan, even if there's not an urgent deadline, but we should know when the deadlines are. Is this the meeting that we're just kind of sharing our thoughts, or is this a meeting where we have to come up with a formal agreed upon feedback?
Okay, this is all very, very useful. And by the way, I really appreciate all of the comments that you guys have put together tonight. I think this is going to be real helpful, and it's a great kind of reset for going forward for how the committee can can share its thoughts with the planning board.
Okay. All right.
Great. Well, thank you guys for that discussion. I, at the beginning of this, promised Gary that we would be out in time for the State of the Union, so I'm going to keep that promise. But I wanted to bring up a discussion that maybe can carry on into our next meeting as well, which will be at the end of March, probably. As you all know, we are in the initial stages of launching a second amendment to the master plan, the 2010 master plan, which is our Great Seneca Science Corridor minor master plan amendment phase 2. Which is a mouthful. We're coming up with another name for it. So if you have any great names, send them my way. But this plan is really going to be taking a comprehensive look at the area, at the Great Seneca area, and it will maintain the 2010 plan boundaries. So we'll really be looking at the same area and taking a look at the recommendations from the 2010 plan, including the staging from the 2010 plan, and then also incorporating, recent county policies and initiatives like Vision Zero, the uh, racial equity and social justice resolution, Thrive if it is passed, and other other county policies that have been uh, that have come to be over the past 10 years since the plan was approved and adopted. So it's going to be a big initiative in this area, and planning staff, our team, I'm going to be leading this master plan effort, and we're hoping to work closely with the implementation advisory committee throughout the plan process. And one of our efforts is going to be doing extensive outreach and engagement with the community. And we thought that this could be an opportunity to partner with the IAC and to figure out ways that we can make sure that we're reaching a diverse audience, that, diversity in many ways that reflects the area that we're planning for. And then we also thought this would be a great opportunity, or could be a great opportunity too, for the IAC to hear from, a diverse audience as well, if we can successfully plan this together. But to really do some outreach or engagement in partnership with the committee, in addition to any other efforts that may come up. But so I know that that's like a big topic and kind of broad, but I wanted to start broaching it now so that we can start thinking about it and also get a pulse on what you as IAC members, think, or also if you're all members of this committee, and you might say, we're really missing voices from X community or X group or X neighborhood or whatever it is, and kind of point that out as well, because in addition to being advisors who are aware of the Great Seneca Science Corridor Master Plan, you're also, many of you, representatives of your community, and that's part of your role on this committee. Not everyone. Some people have are institutional representatives, but we just want to make sure that we're hearing from uh, a large group of people as we move forward with the master plan. I also want to acknowledge that this is not the sole responsibility of the IAC, and we will be doing lots of engagement and outreach activities that will be outside of any coordination and collaboration with the IAC, even though we will always invite you guys to participate. And we will be working with institutional partners individually, and community members and businesses and life science industry representatives. So, not to say that this will be a burden that is solely on the IAC, but we do want to think about, does this sound like something that the IAC is interested in pursuing? And if so, what could this look like? And yeah, who are communities whose voices we may be missing in the IAC? So again, I know that's a big topic. We might not be able to tackle it all today, but I wanted to kind of set the ground for that discussion in future IAC meetings.
Maren, remind me what the time frame is?
Sure. So the time frame for this plan is we've just kind of begun in February doing our initial kind of existing conditions and demographic data and some initial data collection. I'll give you kind of the big milestones. We're expecting to go to the planning board with a scope of work. And for those of you that haven't been through a master plan process, the scope of work is really planning staff statement to the planning board that says this is what we hope to include broadly in our study of the plan area and recommendations that we're looking at. It's not specific. It's more general. It's like areas of inquiry, and the planning board will either approve or amend the scope of work that staff shares. So that we're hoping to do in May, and that will really set kind of the direction of the entire plan process. And then we will not go back. Then kind of starting in May through the end of the year, we'll be doing lots of outreach and engagement and also data collection and probably transportation modeling. And that will go through December, more or less, of 2022. We expect in early 2023 to bring preliminary recommendations to the planning board. So that's doing a pulse check with the planning board where staff says, these are some of the major recommendations that we're considering. Nothing is set in stone yet, but like, do you have any comments? And throughout that process, usually before we go to the planning board and after, we will do meetings with community members as well so that they're aware of what we are recommending and then can comment beforehand, but then can also provide comment after the planning board weighs in as well. Preliminary recommendations in early 2023. I think we're imagining that the working draft, which is kind of the staff's first polished draft of the plan, would go in April or May to the planning board in 2023. And then a public hearing is held a month after the working draft is approved by the planning board. And the public hearing is an opportunity for the public to weigh in again to the planning board. And the first time that they're doing it to the planning board and not to planning staff, because most of the engagement and outreach will be done through planning staff and not to the planning board. So the public hearing is the first time that that planning board is hearing from the public without the filter of the staff, without us passing it on up the line. And then so that will be the public hearing will likely be in June of 2023, and we expect to do then work sessions with the planning board throughout the summer and early fall, and have a public hearing with the county council in October or November of 2023.
So that's ambitious. So the Corridor Cities Transitway, and I know I think we discussed this at the last meeting, right? So with the Corridor Forward Master Plan is not including the CCT, and at the T&E, the council's hearing work session the other day, there was general agreement between the planning board, planning staff, and county council staff that the Corridor Cities Transitway is not going to move forward. So I think I think it's going to be hard to do the master plan without having that decision made.
So that's actually why we ended up doing 2 phases of the amendment, is because we wanted to for this second phase of the amendment to be able to include any recommendations that are approved as part of the corridor forward plan. I think that we'll have to revisit if the council kicks the can down the road in terms of making a decision and providing guidance on transit in the area. But the idea is that, or the work program that we have currently for Corridor Forward suggests that by May of 2022, the council will have approved the Corridor Forward plan, and the planning board will adopt it. So if they stick to that schedule, then we will be able to incorporate any guidance that is in the Corridor Forward plan in our master plan and into our land use planning, land use recommendations. If there is a great departure from that work program that was set out by council, then I think we will have to revisit it. That's always part of the fun of planning when there are lots of moving pieces. But no, I think that's a really good point, Marilyn. And I feel confident that if the council does provide guidance, regardless of what the guidance is on transit in the area, that we will be able to incorporate that into our work. And I think the really intensive kind of community engagement portion will really be the second half of this year. And I think that would put us in a nice position to both get people's feedback, but also share information, because I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are not aware of Corridor Forward or the final recommendation. So we'll see part of our role in this planning effort is also educating the public about what has been decided by council, especially if it impacts the area related to the plan.
Okay.
And everything deals with the 270, 495 decision, which looks like, based on the court case of the losing bidder, going to be delayed quite some time. So making a decision on moving forward with the money that is envisioned to come from the P3 to help with support the transit improvements may not happen. It may change if if it has to be rebid, or it may take many months to resolve. And if that takes many months to resolve, I don't know why or how the council could take an action on Corridor Forward if there's no expectation or reduced expectation of transit money coming in to support whatever network is decided upon. No, it's very confusing to me.
Yeah, in the work session the other day, they alluded to that. They made the assumption that it will eventually move forward and eventually there will be the funding that would go. They didn't make a definitive decision on anything, right? So the next work session is next week, I guess. But I'm assuming the assumption is that the money will go to the 355 BRT.
Yeah.
If there's money, because there's still
yes.
many uncertainties. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think there are other opportunities which are probably equally uncertain. So I don't know that helps. And I was looking at some of the items in the Jobs and Infrastructure Act, the federal big federal infrastructure act, that seems to have some opportunities for maybe finding some additional funding sources, but I think they're just as certain as anything else that's being considered right now. So it's another opportunity, but with another uncertain outcome. All interesting pieces to try to work with.
That's why Marin has such a long schedule.
And we are
Well,
definitely
good luck.
not going to meet it. So I think what might be helpful, because I realize that this is a big topic and just a little bit of time, and I think some more prompting and maybe some like pre-survey would help. I think what I'd like to do, if that works for the committee, is I'm going to send out a survey to you all. And when I say survey, it's going to be very brief, but just, if you can put some time into thinking about groups that you think would be important to reach out to. And, when I say group, that could be like students, that could be renters, that can be, whoever you think voice needs to be heard, that's either we're missing in this committee or that you're worried that we might miss in the in our outreach and engagement process for the master plan. And then I will also kind of compose some additional information to share with you 2 weeks before the next meeting, so that we can have a basis that we're all working from, just in terms of an understanding for the master plan. But if you would all be willing to fill out a very brief survey, and also think of any questions or ideas that you have surrounding how we reflect community voices, both within the IAC, but also how we can do that in the master plan. I would really appreciate that. And I think that it will allow us to have a better conversation. I think I did not prepare well enough for this one. And we have 8 minutes left, so I don't know if we're gonna get there today, but luckily this is a very long process and we're at the beginning, and we have a while to talk about it. If you also have additional questions about the master plan process, I can give a presentation next time, or you can shoot me an email if you have things that you'd like me to cover next time about the master plan and how this fits in with the work that the IAC does, and with the 2010 Great Seneca Science Corridor master plan. I'm happy to answer questions offline or in our next meeting, or tonight if someone has a quick question. Looks like we're good.
I think you did an excellent job tonight, Marin and Steve. So thank you very much.
And
Organizing.
Marilyn and Phil did a
Oh,
good
yeah, they
job
always-
managing that.
Yeah, I'm talking and I'm muted again. Yeah, and Marilyn and Phil, I really appreciate it. I think that this was a very helpful kind of learning meeting for us to kind of relearn how to do this. And I think we've got a lot of good ideas about how to make this process continue to work better for everybody. And I really appreciate everybody's time and thoughts and participation, because I think we can talk about some things that'll keep making this better.
I have a question. It's Jane again. What is being constructed next to the athletic center with those 2 big tower cranes that have been installed? Did we see that site plan across from Crown on Great Seneca?
Oh, that's
What is
a
that?
senior, it's a senior center. The senior housing.
So did we see those plans, or do they not come, or is that outside of our area?
Yeah, it's outside. It's outside of
It
our
sounds like it's
area.
in Gaithersburg. If
It is, yeah, it's in the
Yeah.
city.
yeah,
That's the City of Gaithersburg project. Yes. This is Laura with the
Okay.
City of Gaithersburg.
thank
I
you,
just
Laura.
saw the tower cranes and I'm like, I don't know what that project is, like,
Yes,
okay,
it's
Yeah,
senior
we-
housing and assisted living.
interesting. Must be a tall building.
I'm not sure how many stories, but it is multi-story. I'm just not sure how tall.
Thank you. I was just curious.
Glad we
So,
had Laura to jump in.
Marin, it does sound like it's a good idea to do at least a brief presentation on the master planning process for, to refresh some, those of us who haven't really talked about it in a few years, and those of us who haven't talked about it in the past. So, right.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm happy to do that. I'll do a presentation on the on the master plan process in general, and then also provide some information about our plans relating specifically to this master plan. And I think what could be helpful also is mapping out some times that might be beneficial for the IAC to weigh in too, so that we can build that into our long-term plan for the IAC, and then, as I said, discuss how we might collaborate throughout the process. So
Another, I'm sorry, another thought for something that might be helpful. Again, we talked about this a little bit in our side conversation a couple weeks ago, but I shared my perspective that one of the key challenges in outreach to the community is just having appropriate, especially digital communication tools and things like that, right? And I think it would be helpful if you guys could grab someone from the planning staff that actually is familiar with the digital the current digital digital materials that are available to us and the community. And if we could walk through that a little bit. I mean, we were poking around today a little bit at some of the URLs and so on, and we saw 80 some odd PDFs representing one site plan with very little context to help us as we try to navigate those kind of materials. I don't know that we're going to quickly become expert, and that we're going to help our communities become expert, but it would certainly be nice to have some insight, about the structure, the organization, how those materials are intended to be used, how, so we can provide, among other things, I'll be glad to provide feedback around how we could improve that, as part of the master plan process, and, maybe offer some perspective on that.
I will say the master plan process is quite a bit friendlier than the regulatory process in terms of the materials that we provide. So that's a nice thing, but it might be helpful to have someone that could speak broadly about the materials and kind of digital side for the planning department in general. I do think that if you look at most of our master plan pages, they're more friendly than the 80 some odd, PDFs that you find on DAIC. Because of the nature of regulatory versus master plan that is more public facing throughout. But it would be great.
Yeah, we have a lot of regulatory material that is available to the public, but not necessarily accessible in terms of.
It's not really accessible to me either, but so I sympathize. But I think that that's a great idea. That maybe even as Steve was saying, if you see these letters LL, you know what it stands for in a regulatory case. But so we can look into that as well as having someone else available to address that. And we are developing our communications plan right now, so I'd be happy to have you guys weigh in on that as well for the master plan, not for regulatory or for the broader organization. So that can be part of the discussion.
Thanks.
All right. So and if there's no objection, I'd like to set the meeting for the last Tuesday of the month in March, if that works for everyone, and I can send out an invitation really early so that it's on the calendar. And please check and let me know if there's some huge event that I am scheduling over that I am not aware of.
So just so you know, there are 5 Tuesdays in March.
Oh, it's 5 Tuesdays.
Did you say March or April?
Yes,
I said March.
I did say March.
So there are 5 Tuesdays, which is fine with me, just so you know.
I think we would do it on the 29th. I think that's how Steve has worked in the past, is just whatever the last Tuesday is of the month. So it'd be March 29th, which is kind of nice because it gives us space between this technically March meeting tonight.
Yeah, and people usually don't have stuff on the 5th Tuesday of anything, right? So.
Excellent. All right, we're sliding in there. So look out for that invitation and for a survey, and then following that, some materials over the next few weeks. And
9 o'clock. And so Marilyn and Phil, do you want to call us adjourned here?
Go for it, Marilyn.
Okay, we are adjourned. Or we don't need a motion, right? I mean, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.